This is Chris Walls from Forum One. Welcome, very excited to have you join us today here on this webinar about using the power of data visualization to close the hunger gap. Forum One is thrilled to be joined today by our friends from the Capital Area Food Bank to hear about how the food bank has used data visualization to inform and support their work in providing food to those most in need in the greater DC area. Before we get started, I just want to mention a little background. Many of you know who work in the NGO space that today in 2017, NGOs who deliver social services are having to be ever more efficient in their work and having to better target their services to where the demand is really growing and not met. You know, demand for social services is high and resources are tight. You know, on the other side of the economy, we know that businesses increasingly use data analytics, data visualization to help inform and drive decision-making around their businesses. In the NGO space, this is less common. We don't see as many examples of this. But today we have an excellent example here in how the Capital Area Food Bank is using data visualization to effectively target its service delivery. The Capital Area Food Bank, you'll hear more about them, but they're the largest organization in the Washington, D.C. area working to solve hunger. They work with more than 400 partner organizations and serve more than 500,000 people in the greater D.C. area. Huge program. Today we'll hear about the food bank's experience in using data visualization in identifying where is the greatest need for food services, where are they meeting and not meeting those needs, and where do they need to target additional services with their partners. I find this example, this case study we're about to hear, really exciting, and listen for how they really use this new data visualization tool to change how they deliver their programs in important ways. You know, this is where they send food, where they send trucks, where they send support on a day-to-day basis. Very excited to have join us here from the Capital Area Food Bank today, two people who will be presenting with us. Jody Tick is the Chief Operating Officer of the Capital Area Food Bank, and Dan Schenk-Evans is the Director of IT for the Capital Area Food Bank. We'll have time for your questions at the end, and you can add them in a question window as a part of the webinar. And let me turn now to Jody and Dan.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to everyone joining us today. So the Capital Area Food Bank is the region's largest organization working to solve hunger and its companion problems of malnutrition and diet-related disease. What we know is that hunger is here. We know that hunger exists in every part of our region, in every zip code. In the District of Columbia, we have the 6th highest child food insecurity rate in the nation, with 27% of children under age 18 living in food insecure households. Even in Northern Virginia, an area with one of the wealthiest counties in the country, 6.7% of the residents are food insecure. Food insecurity is defined as a chronic lack of access to sufficient nutritious food. In the Washington metropolitan area, there are nearly 700,000 residents that we have identified as food insecure. So the Capital Area Food Bank is working to take hunger off the map. Each year, we distribute 45 million pounds of food, reaching 540,000 of our neighbors throughout Greater Washington. We address hunger by distributing food and educational resources through our network of 444 food assistance partners and directly to the community through innovative programming. We work with many food assistance partners that you may know, including Bread for the City and DC Central Kitchen in the district, Manna in Montgomery County, and Serve in Northern Virginia. The majority of our partners, however, are small organizations, many faith-based, that distribute food on a monthly basis and rely solely on volunteers for their hunger work. In areas where we don't have enough partner capacity to meet the need, we roll up with a truck and distribute directly to the community. So how we work. We are the fruits and vegetables behind Thrive DC, Shabak, and Food for Others. We provide after-school meals at Boys and Girls Clubs and summer meals at Department of Parks and Rec sites. We are the supplemental groceries for low-income seniors and families who qualify for federal nutrition assistance. And at the Capital Area Food Bank, we approach hunger with a 21st century lens. Ways we do this include contributing to the health and wellness of the community by providing not only enough food, but enough of the right kinds of foods, and embracing our hunger work through technology for effective and efficient decision making. In 2015, we had this idea for a pilot project to help us define where hunger is in our region and who is hungry. For example, we know that through the gentrification of many areas that low-income residents are often pushed out of urban areas to more suburban areas. The change in geography, as you will see later in the presentation, changes how we approach the problem of hunger. And we have always known how much food we've been putting into the community. We measure ourselves based upon pounds. But the question we have continued to ask ourselves has been, are our efforts moving the dial to reduce hunger in our region as well as we possibly can? As part of our strategic plan, we have a goal to weave a strong safety net under the Greater Washington region, and we needed a better way to understand the magnitude of need, where the need is most acute, and where need outstrips food resources. From these questions evolved the hunger heat map that visualizes our quantitative data to tell a story of where hunger gaps exist in the metropolitan area. The hunger heat map was originally developed solely as an internal tool to use data to drive decisions. But after demoing it with our partners, donors, and other stakeholders, we released it publicly as a resource to the community. We have used the plan internally to plan program expansions, solicit new partners, and to test new and innovative hunger solutions, and we consult it on a regular basis. I'll turn it over to Dan to talk about the technology and data behind our hunger heat map.
Thank you, Jody. So some of you may be asking, how does an organization get into Geographic Information Systems or GIS work? The answer is actually that it's not as hard as it looks. There are so many resources online, so much help in the cloud, and the software costs are reasonable that it doesn't have a huge threshold to get into. By far the most expensive part of this project will be the level of effort and the time required to gather all your data, or if you're like us, potentially the need to purchase an entire new CRM and data warehouse. So to start with, the good news is that it doesn't take a genius to lead this project. While it is true that it won't happen overnight because it does involve a fair amount of focused effort in the development of very specific skills and knowledge, you don't have to hire a data scientist. Although of course that would help speed up the process. But there is an unavoidable learning curve for anyone new to the field, even for a data analyst or database administrator. In our case, we asked a recent college graduate to do it, and he was more than excited to take it on. He was not even a computer science or information systems. He didn't have a degree in those fields, but he was just tech savvy and was excited to explore a new field. And that was all he needed to take it on and get us off the ground. So as far as tools go, we chose the products developed by Esri, who is a leader in the field. We use both ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Online. The good news is here that they are not very expensive. They have great deep nonprofit discounts with good online support. So for example, ArcGIS Desktop only costs $100 per license. And this application lets you play around with the data as much as you want and create maps, mostly for internal purposes as you get to know your data. The online tool, with all its public-facing functionality, costs a little more. It costs about $100 a month. And plus a couple $100 for some data sets, or depending on how much you use it. But we're talking here only about a couple $1,000s, not tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, there are many ways to spend more money if you want advanced modules, plugins, and data sets, but nothing we show today required them. So we want to make sure you understand that this software didn't cost us more than $2,000 a year. So the main initial challenge you'll probably face is actually more determining what are the best and most valid sources of data that can match your particular mission. There are plenty of free data sets, but some are not updated very often. Some are not very accurate. But there are many paid data sets, and you will have to make decisions on, financially and just with integrity of the data, which ones are the best ones for you. You can always look at Wikipedia, which lists a lot of the good GIS sources, and that's a good way to start. But as far as the direct level of effort, I would estimate that in most cases, you should have productive maps, at least for internal uses, in no more than 3 to 6 months of somebody maybe working half-time on the project. So it does require that kind of focus, but it's not an unwanted, it's not too much of an effort. The place where you will likely face some challenges if you were like us is if you don't have all your data in one place and you have to now worry about trying to go through the work and effort to make that happen. So the hidden unexpected costs will be associated with cleaning up your data, with chasing down multiple disparate systems and putting it all into one CRM or one data warehouse. Some of you may have hit this iceberg before, and good for you, but for the rest of you, that is something you'll want to embark on. In our case, we had to create a new CRM and data warehouse from scratch, and so that slowed up our initial progress or made our data less easy to manipulate. So you of course want to take care of this as much as you can, because otherwise you'll have pretty maps that provide inaccurate or misleading information, and which lead you to make invalid conclusions. So the amount of work required to accomplish this task will vary from organization to organization, depending on how far up the ladder you are with your data hygiene and how sophisticated your data is. So we're now going to move into our map, and we want to answer the question, where did we start? The foundation of our GIS analysis was based on the food insecurity rate, which Jody spoke about. It is a percentage of people that do not have enough money to pay for all their meals, often because most of their money goes to rent or medical costs. We get this data mostly from the US Census, but then Feeding America, our umbrella organization for food banks, they take it and massage it a little bit and provide further and more detailed analysis at the subtract level and factor in other criteria. In the end, we can see how many more meals would be required in a particular area for there to be no food insecurity in that census tract. Those meals are then converted to pounds of food, which is the currency we work with day to day to figure out how effective we're being in distributing food. So in the map that you see here in front of you now, the red tracks are those with food insecurity rate over 29.5%, as you see in the legend. That means that almost a third of the people don't always know where the next meal will come from. Blue tracks, on the other hand, are the areas with low food insecurity.
So this map is what one would expect from what we know about the community. So as you can see in the inlay of the map, there's high need in Southeast Washington, D.C. in wards 7 and 8, which is what we understand from that particular area. And then we have low security in areas such as northern Montgomery County.
So if we go ahead and zoom in to a specific census tract, you can see that this community is clearly in need. There are just over 6,000 people that live in this tract. Notice that the median income for a family of 4 is just over 50,000, and the food insecurity rate is over 30%. Also notice that 31% of the people rely on public transportation, and that the poverty rate and unemployment rate are high. All those are indicators that there's a lot of need in that area. On the other hand, if we move over to a wealthy community, you can see that the median income is over 200,000 and home ownership rate is 83%. Thus, it's not surprising that the food insecurity rate is 0. Interestingly enough, though, you can see that the unemployment rate of 9.3% and the poverty rate of 12.1% means that there's poverty even in this community. And those are the kind of pockets we were hoping to find through our work with the GIS system. Now, let's move to the second layer of our hunger heat map. This slide shows you the location of all our 444 community partners who get food from us, as well as the sites where we directly distribute food, and with a blue dot representing those sites that do both for us. As you can imagine, before our full-featured GIS system, we had a mapping program that allowed us to see our site locations and get directions, but no food distribution data was attached to each dot. And before that, we had a large poster board on the wall with push pins for all our agencies. So we knew where they were, of course, but with a poster, we could not query any data or overlay any other layers to see more what was happening in the community. So the power of our GIS maps is that they're interactive and they allow us to do much more analysis. They are not even close to being updated in real time right now, but we can dream of that day in the future. While we could fairly easily update on a daily basis the total number of food pounds we distribute per agency, we do rely on food insecurity rates and other factors that are not calculated as often, so we go ahead and just do it twice a year. So now let's zoom into the second layer. Here's one of our community direct distribution sites, the Ann Beers Elementary School. This school is part of our Joyful Market program and located in Ward 8. They distribute over 28,000 pounds of food, of produce, and other groceries to our families with young children. We are especially proud of our work with children, as not only do we want them to be fully fed, but we want them to learn about the benefits of fresh fruits and vegetables in their diet. With our programs, we control what food is distributed, and thus we guide them towards their nutritious choices. Now, looking into one of our community partners, our partners run their own food distribution programs, and we don't fully control what they're distributing, or we're not the only source of it. In this case, when we click on this site, DuPont Park SCA Church, the main thing we see is that below their name and address is that they have distributed 78,000 pounds of food, 68,000 which is produce. That is also a very high percentage, and we get great satisfaction in knowing that the partners are distributing healthy food when they do it on their own through our educational efforts. So shifting gears a little bit, I want you to notice that the dot for this organization is in a beige track area, but it's very close to areas that are red and have greater need. So this led us to ask certain questions. From where do the people who receive food at these sites travel from? How far do they have to travel, and how often do they cross boundaries? And how do we take that into account with all our estimates of the food insecurity rate in each area? Well, to answer that, we started relying on data once again. This slide shows you the results of our work. For this map, we use a tool called PRAN, which was developed by Feeding America statisticians to calculate the dispersion of food from our sites based on where the food insecure individuals likely live, while also taking into account their access to car or public transportation rates. With this layer, we can visualize how our 45 million pounds of food are disseminated into the community through our 444 partners and direct distribution sites, instead of assuming that all the food ends up exactly where the site is located. We know that the food distribution from our partners bleeds across census tract lines, and their data gives us the percentage likely to fall within different radius of distances from that site.
And so the food bank's distribution of pounds aligns with what we see in our food insecurity layer. And this is something that we would expect. So the food bank is distributing more foods in areas that are dark green, such as wards 7 and 8, to follow our example, and less in northern Montgomery County, which is represented by the white and light green.
So what's the end result? Drum roll, please. This map shows us where we need to focus our efforts. It is a combination of all the layers. When we put all those layers on the map, we can now see the gaps in our service area. These are the areas that had the greatest need, where we are distributing insufficient amount of food. This map made it much easier to see those hidden pockets of hunger within the more wealthy areas, as well as the areas with deep food insecurity where we are having less of an impact than we might have guessed, given the number of partners we already have in the ground in that area.
So we also call this our gap map because it represents unmet pounds. So the combination of layers surprised us when we first created the hunger heat map. So as you can see in Prince George's County, there are large swaths of hunger hotspots that are more than one would think when looking at just the food insecurity layer, which included the pink areas of this map, which are also yellow in the food insecurity layer. There are also pockets of need in Montgomery and Fairfax counties, which are areas with some of the highest median incomes in the nation. And as you can see in Southeast DC, there are still areas of deep red, however, not as significant as in the food insecurity layer. But it means that we are making a difference in this community, but also that we need to double down and with more food and different ways to get at the hunger in this area.
This layer, which went into that last map, is the final primary layer that visualizes how many pounds of food we put into each community divided by the number of food insecure persons. So this map is a combination of the layers of need, well, what are the unmet pounds, and the layer of impact. So we're now going to move on and actually look at the before and after of a couple of these maps. As Jody already talked about, originally when we're just looking at the food insecurity rate, Southeast DC shows up as all red, and that's what this map clearly shows. And after we analyze the effect of our work, we can see some of the areas have now turned to white or beige, showing us where we're having the most impact, but others still remain red. This allows us to decide where we're going to target our services and where we're going to put the most level of effort in the next year. If we dig into the details in one of these areas, you can see that right here, the pounds that are unmet still show up, and we know that that's the number that we need to get down if at all possible. So that's the details behind that map that showed us where we're having the most effect and where we need to put our efforts in the future.
So I'm just going to walk through a couple of examples of how we've used the hunger heat map to drive our hunger solutions. The first one is the Joyful Food Market. And so the issue was working that we know that in Ward 7 and Ward 8, there is high rates of obesity and diet-related disease. There's one supermarket for 70,000 people in Ward 8, and that there are 14,000 children attending schools in Ward 7 and 8. So the solution is working with our partner Martha's Table. We established the Joyful Food Market, which Dan mentioned earlier, which is essentially a monthly pop-up market in elementary schools. We prioritize the launch and the rollout of the JFMs based upon our hunger heat map to ensure we were going to the highest need areas first. And we chose schools because they're an excellent access point to reach families with children and a hook to get families into schools to being more active. Our goal is to be in all 49 public elementary schools over time, and we will have rolled out to about 39 of those 49 schools by the fall. The impact that we've seen since launching the program in 2015, we've provided 1.2 million pounds of food to 70,000 individuals. And interestingly enough, a recent survey that we conducted as part of this project found that 75% of the respondents have made changes to their diet at home after participating in this program. The second one is our summer meals bus. The issue was that many low-income children receive a majority of their food at school. When school is out, hunger's on the rise. Whereas kids in DC can walk or take public transportation to access a summer meal, we know that transportation is a major barrier to accessing food, and specifically summer meals in our suburban and rural areas. Thus, this hunger solution for the suburbs has to be different than one in an urban area. And we know that along the Route 1 corridor in Northern Virginia that there are pockets of need. The area is not pedestrian friendly. If a family has a car, it's usually with a parent or caregiver at work. So the solution was, let's take the food to the kids. So with the support from grocery retailer Shoppers Food Warehouse, we retrofitted a school bus and deliver meals to children during the summer. We focus on hard to reach areas such as mobile park homes. And since its launch in 2015, we've provided over 9,200 meals to children. And so now that we've had the hunger heat map for a number of years, we can use the data to measure our impact over time. So the case study that you see here is based upon our L Street Community Marketplace, which is a monthly pop-up free farmers market open to the public. It's located between L and First Streets northwest in the district. This is a gentrifying area with pockets of need. And as you can see in the inlay there, in 2012, it was considered a hunger hotspot. By 2015, the color changed from red to yellow, representing a 58% change in unmet pounds, going from 223,000 pounds unmet to 92,000 pounds unmet. So this is a success story, but in areas where we've seen less progress than we would like to, or where a hunger hotspot emerges, we have to tweak our programming or initiate a new hunger solution. And while the capillary food bank plays a significant role in addressing hunger in our area, it's also important to note that there are many factors and social trends that influence food insecurity. The hunger heat map has also been instrumental in helping others visualize where they can partner with the food bank in solving hunger. For example, our long-standing partnership with Giant Foods was recently re-energized with a more strategic focus on health. We overlaid Giant stores on our hunger heat map to show that many Giant stores are in hunger hotspots, and thus many of Giant Many of the Capillary Food Bank clients are also Giant customers. This spurred a project where we partnered with Giant and put our recipe cards in all 92 Giant stores throughout the metropolitan area to help the community eat healthy on a budget.
So what are we planning to do next? Well, first, we'd like to increase the granularity of our data. And to achieve this, for the first time ever, last year we launched a project to install a service management system at our partners so that they could have electronic records of the services they are providing to the families and the actual name and address of the families they're serving. So it'll take us 5 years to get the system into almost all of our partners, but we're already seeing great results from the early adopters. Remember, most of our partners have a small food pantry, and they often did not have any electronic records of who they served. So this is a game changer for them and for us, because now the data will be flowing from them straight up into our system so that we can analyze where hunger is hitting the hardest.
And we also want to do more mapping with health data so we can further tailor our hunger solutions to address diet-related disease, health disparities, and provide educational resources to amplify our healthy food. And finally, our ultimate goal is to evolve our map to be crowdsourced, where our partners can input their own data on food resources that they receive and distribute outside of those from what they receive from the Capillary Food Bank. This will ultimately make the tool stronger and help us further target our resources based upon need. And so we invite you to visit our website to try out the map yourself. Let us know what you think, and also learn more about our work. There's also a button up there to volunteer if you're interested. We're an organization built upon partnerships and collaborations, and we see 26,000 volunteers come through our doors each year to help us in a myriad of ways.
Great,
So
Jody, Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is Chris. It is terrific and fascinating to hear again how you combine these disparate data sources, use them really to analyze the need you're focused on and how well you're meeting it in new ways, and use that really to affect how you design and deliver your programs, and then continuing to monitor and evaluate based on that. Fascinating to hear. Let me start with a question and say, if anyone also wants to pose a question, you can post it in the questions tab on the bottom right-hand side of the webinar page. So please post your questions and we'll be glad to come to them. But let me kick it off with an initial question, which is, Dan, you mentioned, I liked your iceberg slide and talking about how the software and the technology really wasn't the hard part. The hard part was kind of cleaning up the data hygiene, getting it all together. I know that that's a challenge and a blocker for a lot of organizations. And I guess I just wondered if you have any insights on that or lessons learned from that, how to get to a point where your data is all integrated and can support this kind of a project.
Well, I think here at the food bank, we were excited to start moving away from Excel spreadsheets and moving to an integrated systems. But we also know it's a lot of work, so we try to do, follow best practices and formed a committee, a team, we should say, and with executive sponsorship, and got everybody on board that, hey, we need to embark on this big project. We also happened to hire our first data analyst. So before 4 years ago, we didn't have somebody who focused on data. So that was a big step for the food bank. So it did take, commitment from the top down and to get the project off the ground. But once it did, we had a lot of buy-in from the teams, and they were excited to be able to, at the point, hop onto a single system and be able to see all the different ways people are interacting with an organization, as opposed to one program, knowing how many kids they're serving in that area, and then another program tracking the senior adults in a different spreadsheet. So, I think any organization can do it. They just have to be committed to the fact that there's real value to getting your data in one place, to cleaning it up. And then, of course, ongoing, you have to keep it up, because all those people that are on the original committee, eventually leave, and you have to keep on training the new people coming in, and why is it important, and we make decisions on this data, so we're all in it together.
Mm-hmm. Great. Could you say a word about how having the hunger heat map, having this visual presentation of your work, your service delivery, how has it changed conversations you have with funders, with people who support your work?
So it's been significant. We actually armed our CEO with a Surface with the layers of the hunger heat map on it, and she went around town to stakeholders, to donors, and it made a huge impact. And we've seen, funding levels increase because of it. I will say there's nothing like a visualization of really the things that we've been talking about for so long, whether it's on our website or in person. But when you see it, it becomes real in a way that, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. It really made an impact on everyone who saw it. And, to my note earlier, that's the reason why we made it public, is because we got such a good response on the demonstrations that we provided to donors and others. But donors specifically, we've seen new donors, foundations come on board to support our work because they can see and they want to be part of the solution to solve hunger in their own area. And it's been a real, leg up for us too.
Terrific. Thanks, Jody. A question from one of our listeners, Casey, who asks, what was the name of the data source you used for the transportation data? Do you know, and maybe that's getting into the weeds a little bit, but do you know what transportation data source you used or not?
Unfortunately, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there's one. If you search for walkability, you're going to find it, GIS walkability. And, I think WalkScore, actually, maybe walkscore.org or walkscore.com. It's a great website. And just in case you guys are wondering, I'm not the GIS person here, so I can't get into every detail, but it's a site that tells you exactly, which communities make it easy for people to walk to stores, walk to their work, and so forth.
Great. We had another question from one of our listeners about, you mentioned CRM, getting all your data cleaned up, getting it all to be consistent in the same way, and being in a CRM or a data warehouse without getting into tremendous technical detail. Could you say a little bit about what CRM platform you used?
It's a long story. We ended up building on top of a mostly proprietary system built for 4 other nonprofits. So it's not a system you guys have ever heard of. And most organizations, that's not a great option. You should likely build it on top of an industry leader such as Salesforce or something else. But we did evaluate, Salesforce and Sugar CRM and many of the association management systems. And in the end, none of them quite worked for our food industry. But if we were doing it again, we could easily choose a different path. So for that, you definitely want to go through your standard software selection process, put out an RFP, and do as much due diligence as possible to find the best possible solution. Some industries have much more vertical market options than we do.
I will tag on that in terms of not only the data cleanup and the system to hold and store the data, but we did a lot of work around change management. Dan mentioned that, and this was true. People were really excited. Staff were really excited at the possibility of having data in one place, being able to access it, have it in reports, and then obviously visualize it through the hunger heat map. But don't underestimate the shift that you have to do with your own internal culture to help people move along with you. And I will say, I haven't been part of a lot of data projects, but Dan did a fantastic job in helping our organization move along with us in that space. And as we look and continue to think about our next CRM, we'll be focused on the same thing as well.
Can you say more about what you mean by that, moving the organization along, give some specific examples of what you had to do?
So, yeah, it's a good, so, Dan mentioned, having things out of Excel databases. We had data in Excel databases. We had them in Access databases. People had data on sheets of paper. So when you operate in those types of systems and you create your own workarounds to be able to, retrieve the data that you need for the reports that you need to submit, pulling everything into one system and then making sure that you have a certain data governance part of that so that everyone is inputting data, in the same consistent form and fashion. It takes some effort when you're not used to doing that. And also just beyond the data governance, making sure that, to Dan's point, there's the maintenance of the system and the data, and making sure that you continue to input your data and report back issues that you may have. So we put a lot of work and effort on the front end as well as ongoing in terms of making sure that, staff are on board with not only, using the tool, but maintaining it as well.
Great. You said a little bit at the beginning about the level of effort, kind of the time and cost for this, and I think you mentioned you had a young data analyst work on this about half time for, I think you said, in the range of 6 months. I'd be interested if you could recap or say more about that, and also on an ongoing basis, how much effort does it take for you to keep this data tool up to date?
Yeah, I'd mentioned that, within 3 to 6 months of someone working half time, if you start out with some decent data, they'll be producing stuff that has value. It may not be ready for the public, it may, be incomplete, but especially if you start with someone who already is a data analyst, which in our case wasn't the case. Within a few weeks after they get, if they go to a 1 week training with Esri, they'll come back and be able to kick a lot of great looking maps out. The hard work though is in making sure you're not just producing pretty maps, but is the data exactly what you expect? Are there any surprises? What story is the data telling? But anyway, in 3 to 6 months, there's very likely you're going to get some benefit. It took us a couple years to get all our data in one place, for example. So at first, our initial results were incomplete, but we still immediately saw the value of what they were providing, just kept on pushing towards it. Chris, what was the second half of your question?
So on an ongoing basis, how much effort is required?
Right. I mean, just for the heat map itself, if we just want to update the numbers, we have it down to about 20 hours of work twice a year. So, and that's just because you still got to massage some of the data that we're getting from Feeding America. We still have to look at our data and maybe remove a couple of the categories of product, stuff like that. There's always a little work that goes into it, but it's down to no more than 40 hours a year, just to update what we currently have. Of course, you can spend as much time as you want adding new layers, walkability. Transportation is one of the goals. We want to add more and more into our maps. And as you add new features, that will take more time, of course.
Yeah, and I think part of that is related to the size of our organization. We're about 130 staff. We run multiple programs. We have an inventory. And so for smaller organizations, it may not require the same level of effort or time to maintain. And so that's something to think about too. And for also smaller organizations, you may get this up and running even sooner than we did. You have to understand, we're an organization that's been in the community for 30 plus years. So we had a lot of data. So other organizations may find that, it's even easier than what our experience has been.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think sounds like one of those initiatives that it's going to take you a little bit of time to get it up and running, but it's also something you're going to get better at and refine over a period of years. So get started tomorrow so that you can evolve.
Definitely. And by the way, even if you don't have, I want to clarify, even if you don't have a CRM ready to go, but you have a lot of great data in Excel, you can, draw them straight off of Excel. We use several Excel macros to geolocate all our addresses, and that's just a term for, going out. I think we use a Google API, going out through Google and grabbing all the lats and longs, the latitudes and longitudes for each address. So you can definitely use it without having your integrated system. I was just bring that up just to say, don't wait till you have it perfectly. Start seeing what your data already shows you.
That's great. Let me ask Jody, you mentioned earlier that this has changed somehow your organization works on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. How are your staff using the hunger heat map in their work?
Oh, absolutely. I've been at the Capillary Food Bank for 11 years. And in the early days, our work has always been important. There's always been a need, unfortunately. And, the questions that we ask are like, are we making a difference? Are we making an impact? We're working so hard. And literally now, when a question comes up, and forgive my terminology, but I'll say, let's take the map for a drive. Let's see what's going on in the community in terms of our data, to see if an opportunity makes sense, to see if we need to shift our resources, to see if, there's a wide variety of things. What I will do is kind of clarify that is, we don't just solely rely on the data in our map. We make sure that we truth what we're seeing in the numbers with talking with people in the community. So we do approach this, from both of those perspectives, but we look at the map all the time. It's not just once a year when we're doing program evaluation or budget season. We take a look at it and we use it in meetings, and it's been so helpful across the board, because we run so many different types of programs, whether it be through our partner network or directly to the community. And as we figure out what we want to be doing and evaluate opportunities, we consult it on a regular basis. It's frankly, it's been a game changer.
That's exciting. Yeah, and I loved hearing the story of how the location of your Joyful Markets, your mobile summer meals for targeting kids during the summer, and the community markets, and how you decided where to put those. Really terrific to hear how the map has helped inform you there.
With the Joyful Food Markets, when we first started talking with our partner, Martha's Table, about implementing the project, they are going to be moving actually their facility to Ward 8. So they just wanted to focus on Ward 8. And we knew from our hunger heat map that there are these pockets in Ward 7 that really need to be addressed. And so that's what drove that decision and has set, our rollout ever since. So yeah, it's been a really powerful tool, and they've relied on us for that guidance.
Another area where we'd like to grow into the future is, using it more and more for advocacy. Here at the food bank, like Jody said, we want to become part of the 21st Century Food Bank, and or become one. Where are those food deserts that need to be addressed, and how do we get, we can't meet every need, of course. We need community partners and businesses to start businesses in those areas, to start grocery stores that are affordable. And so the more we can use this to influence, government and business, the better.
Oh, well, Jody and Dan, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your experience here of how you did this. Just to kind of recap for anyone who joined midway, what the Capillary Food Bank did beginning in 2015 was pull together different data sources it had, data from partners, data from other sources, to really do a geographic assessment of where is there food insecurity in the greater DC area. They then layered on top of that, where is service currently be provided, and where therefore is the unmet need for food delivery, and in some unexpected areas, in the midst of some affluent areas. And then they've used this hunger heat map, this geographic tool, to really design and deliver programs in partnership with other groups in key areas. So it's inspiring, great example of a powerful use of data to affect service delivery and really change people's lives. And really thank you for sharing this. We will share with all the participants who signed up key high points from the session and links to the actual heat map itself, as well as a great narrative that the Capillary Food Bank provides around how the hunger heat map works, and also a terrific article from the Washington Post in 2015 that talks about the development of the hunger heat map. So with that, I wanted to say again, thanks to our friends at the Capillary Food Bank for this overview today, valuable, and hope others of you find this inspiring and get going and pull those data sets together that have been gnawing at you. There's value and there's gold to be had by pulling these things together in new ways and finding a visual presentation as they've done here. So terrific, thanks for joining, and you'll be seeing a follow-up email from us about this, and we look forward to your feedback about how the session was. Have a great day.